Come. You'll witness things strange, unexpected, mysterious, but not to be denied. Join me now and take one step beyond.
Please welcome to the stage Senior Advisor to CEO and CTO Autodesk, Jonathan Knowles.
Good afternoon. How's you going for you guys so far? You having a good time? Excellent. How many remember that TV show? Yeah, all the old guys, and I know you all. Everyone who's raising their hand. So, a better world. That's a big deal, right? You know, before we learn how smart design can make a better world, we need to understand what kind of world we have today. If you're like me, it feels as though we are constantly being bombarded about news of the global challenge that our planet faces. Before we started this session, we had a set of looping slides that were highlighting the 15 global challenges that have been identified by an independent international think tank named the Millennium Project. Now, this research group works with over 5,000 experts, business leaders, and policymakers to compile and update this annual list. Climate change, access to clean water, income inequality, public health, the status of women, organized crime, renewable energy, access to information technology. Holy crap, that is quite the to-do list. And these challenges, they can seem overwhelming and often terrifying. How can we solve them? How do we transform Earth from this challenged planet to a truly better world? And what does design have to play in creating that world? Well, researchers, policymakers, and entrepreneurs are looking to solutions for those challenges. And our speakers today and many other bright and creative minds are convinced that smart designers and smart design approach offer real solutions. Now, as designers, you all make stuff. You heard from Jeff on Monday. We are the ultimate tool makers. We are the creative species. I mean, anthropologists often define us by the tools we make. But often, things we design come with unintended consequences. And we need to do the thinking about this stuff that avoids these unintended and often unhappy consequences. Because once we design a creative solution and a mindset, we always have it. Once we designed the wheel, we always had it. It wasn't like we didn't have wheel anymore after that. And once these guys perfected the scientific method, well, we always had that. So with the right tool set and mindset, we're all capable of overcoming these challenges. But it does require some long-term thinking and holistic thinking. So today, we've gathered dedicated experts who are all noteworthy for their long-term and holistic approaches. They will all share their stories, they'll describe their work and their vision for a better world. And throughout our forum, we'll return to the Millennium Project's list of challenges, and we'll map how each speaker's work addresses some of those challenges. Now, for our theme today is a better world, our mantra is one step beyond. And what do I mean by that? Well, for starters, our speakers have all taken one step beyond the typical job. When it came to choosing a career, they chose to satisfy their passion for design, but also their passion to make this a better world. They want to make a living, of course, but they also want to make a difference. Still, there's more to this idea. We're all inspired by clever and smart design, but a bright idea or a clever design doesn't always equal success. We know that. The world is littered with clever ideas and designs that ignored the real-world context. It simply isn't enough to have a great idea. What sets our speakers apart is their ability to match a good design or a great idea with a pragmatic, thoughtful approach. Now, you'll hear these speakers describe a great idea, but also how they are taking one step beyond to consider the cultural, economic, and political context and the barriers to adoption. And finally, we want you to appreciate the breadth and diversity of each approach. You'll see nonprofit and for-profit approaches. You'll see smart buildings and clever tools. You'll also see well-designed business models. You'll learn how the Smithsonian Institution applies design technology in new dynamic ways. And you'll see individuals who apply their creativity and design training to solve problems. And we sincerely hope you walk away with an appreciation for the variety of paths our speakers have taken when they combined their love of design with their commitment to making a better world. And nobody exemplifies this spirit more than Cameron Sinclair. Cameron is the co-founder and CEO, that's chief optimist, by the way, chief eternal optimist, by the way, of Architecture for Humanity. Architecture for Humanity is a charitable organization. They seek architectural and design solutions to humanitarian crises. They bring professional design services to communities in need both at home and abroad. And together with his co-founder, in 2006, they published a book on socially conscious design titled Design Like You Give a Damn, Architectural Responses to Humanitarian Crises. Incidentally, the same year, Cameron won the TED Prize. By the way, there's someone from TED here in the audience today. Are you in here, Ginny? She's in here somewhere enjoying this presentation. I heard her back there. More recently, they released a sequel to this book, Design Like You Give a Damn, Building Change from the Ground Up. And I think probably most of you, if not all of you, received a free copy of that book as you entered, and Cameron will gladly sign your copy of the book at a table right back here just after this session. But now, please, let's meet Cameron Sinclair.
Have you ever had the feeling that you knew what someone was going to say just before he said it? Or have you ever walked into a strange room and had the sensation that you'd been there before? Well, if you have, you've taken a small step beyond. Now watch a giant step.
We live in a world where less than 1% get the services that we offer, and with 7 billion people on the planet, we need more and more architects, engineers, and building professionals involved in this work. I strongly encourage people to get involved.
So, good afternoon. I'm Cameron. I will note, I'm originally from England, so when I hear One Step Beyond, madness comes to my mind. The band, of course, not the infection. And of course, that is also the producer of one of the greatest songs called Our House, which is currently in the middle of the street, and you'll be seeing some of that later. I'm going to take you on a journey around the world and ask you a very simple question. It's, what do you see? So at the moment, you can look very kind of pessimistically at the world and see despair and poverty and blight and destruction. But when an architect or a designer looks at the world, it's very different. This is Harrison, New Jersey. This is on the way to Newark, if you take the PATH train. And when you see it, you think, well, this is, primed for development, and, someone's going to just put in high-rise homes. But, when a designer or an architect begins to look at this space, they say, well, why can't we reclaim the wetlands and kind of protect and conserve this? We'll open up the river and make it access to people, and then bring in some architectural elements to, infuse this relationship between man-made and the natural environment. So this is about not just designing things, it's about creating resiliency. And resiliency is not by chance, it's by design. And the role that we play is to build a more sustainable future with the power of innovative solutions. And today you're going to see so many of these innovative solutions. Now, Architecture for Humanity has been really fortunate. We've been able to work in some of the toughest neighborhoods in the world and to transform buildings and do them in a resilient manner. And when we talk about resiliency, it's not just the structure itself. It's how do we build community, create jobs, have social cohesion, and really bring dignity and hope to communities that have gone through a natural disaster or a conflict or are living in dire poverty. Now, as mentioned by Jeffrey, we're this kind of rogue band, if you'd like to think about a multidisciplinary team of building professionals, architects, engineers, construction professionals. And we provide professional design services. But most importantly, it's not just ideas. There's a million ideas to change the world, but unless you build it, it doesn't matter. If you want to make impact, you actually have to build it. So when we're working in these communities, we can't go in there and say, we're just going to design a solution for you. We have to build a solution. We also have to look very rapidly at not just designing at present situations, but for future, planning for future disasters, as well as planning for future economies and future environments. But that's also not just creating stability and strength economically, but protecting cultural heritage of a community. Our architects live and work in those communities. We embed them in the communities. They will live up to 2 years within towns and villages until they finish and complete a project. We marry them with local professionals, and we create this bridge, as I mentioned, between the natural and the built environment. Our communities are not just our clients, but they're partners in the process. We listen and learn to their needs, but we have them design with us. And in that process, we begin to realize that as we are designing a solution, it's not always the most technological, greatest solution is the one that needs to be built. How can we create enough jobs locally? So part of the design solution is to maximize local jobs and local skills and train people so that they can expand that impact to millions of people. This is the only geeky slide I'm going to show you. For those of you who are not architects and want to know what one looks like, it's the guy up there above technical expertise. You see round ring glasses, turtleneck. So what I think about us as an organization, yes, we're a nonprofit, but what we're doing is we're tying in investments in the community with the technical expertise that we bring, and then managing the construction process. But the most important part is to design yourself out of a job. Our role is not to go into community and decide, well, this is going to be good. We can just stay here and we can just milk this community with lots of cool ideas and designs. We're not here to set roots in communities. We're here to create solutions that empower and gain ownership, and that we can find our way so that we're not needed anymore. Redundancy is our job. Resiliency is the community's. So we've worked for 14 years. We've built about 6,000 structures, and we've helped about 2.2 million people. I have 5 offices in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, Cape Town, South Africa, San Francisco, Ishinomaki, Japan. We just opened one in Bogota, and as you can imagine, we're just opening offices in New Jersey and New York as a response to Sandy. We have local chapters. These represent over 5,000 architects and engineers that do pro bono work. As you can see, we have a Las Vegas chapter, and they're working on an adult daycare and also an early learning center right now. So again, as I begin to look at these projects that I'm going to show you, I want you to begin to ask yourself, well, what do you see? So let's take you to violent places. We find ourselves working not just in areas of conflict, but deep violence within poverty. This is Kaielisha in Cape Town, one of the most violent areas of this neighborhood. This is where women were raped, murdered, and dumped for decades. And rather than trying to pick a spot that's nice and easy for us to work in, this urban planning group mapped all the crime in the area and figured out the hotspots. And the idea is to do urban acupuncture. You put the project where it's needed most, and you create the strongest effect. So making sure that we put that project in place, and we relay them beyond acupuncture points and stamp out all the crime. Working with the community to do a community center that does health, education, after-school care, small business. The kids who are going to be using the center, which is also a soccer field and the HIV/AIDS awareness center, help design it. We build the center. As you see, this opened a couple of years ago. The one thing that happened was a massive increase in perceived safety. Just by building this center and having a place where the community can gather, everyone just said, well, this seems like a safe place, and they brought their kids and they brought the rest of their family. And what happens is when you bring your family, it becomes safe. So the connection between perceived safety and safety is very close. When we're talking about sustainability, our projects have to do 3 things. There has to be economic sustainability, for-profit businesses within the center to make sure they can maintain and run that center, environmental protection, and cultural protection. Make sure that we include artists and musicians in the creation of that structure. As you can see, it was taken through this HIV/AIDS program. Over 18,000 children have gone through this center. And then there's been a massive decrease in the murder rate. So, war-torn places. I'm going to go through this really, really quick. So this is in Rwanda. This is a center that brings together Hutu and Tutsi children who were born after the genocide. It's a reconciliation project that uses sports as a mechanism for leadership and working together. Using local crafts and artisans, we were able to create a really dignified structure in the heart of this community. And what's nice about it is that it's surrounded by about 40,000 people who live in their homes. And when you want to know where your kids are, you just look down the hill and you can see that your kids are there playing soccer. The great thing is when they have a game, they suddenly have 40,000 spectators who can cheer them on. So it's kind of the most low-cost stadium ever. I'm running out of time. I'm going to jump through these. I want to get on to our post-disaster work. This is why I'm going there. Here at home, we've been working a lot on homeless issues. In Minneapolis, which gets fiercely cold, there's been a growing number of families that have become homeless because of the economy. One of the #1 things that families need is storage. So working with a lot of homeless shelters, we created very simple storage lockers so families could actually take things with them, you know, the school books and supplies and things like that. So families know that even though they don't have a permanence, they have this transitional spot that they can leave their things in. So I'm going to talk about unhealthy places, because this is something that I really care about very much, is what's happening in America around youth obesity.
I probably would make a time machine.
I would make medicine for the sick.
I'd probably invent something new.
我会赢到5个总冠军戒指。
If I could have an extra 5 years to live.
You said 5, right?
5 years.
It's a long time.
I would try to fix everything I did bad.
I would bring my uncle back because I miss him very much.
I would get more hamsters.
I would probably want to go looking for dark matter.
I think I'd go looking for aliens.
If I could live an extra 5 years.
I was thinking about making like a helicopter, like a wooden helicopter, but I don't have any wood.
I want to go check out the moon sometime. I'd probably teach my sister not to hate tuna.
I would try and invent a machine that lets you run at light speed.
If I had 5 more extra years to live.
I would be the boss of all the chipmunks.
Eu cantaria na frente de 1 milhão de pessoas.
I don't really know. I think I'd do anything. Why are you asking me that?
This is one of those hidden crises that we don't, we're focused on the natural disasters and war, but the one thing that we haven't been looking at is what's happening in healthcare of young children. And what's happened is obesity rates have skyrocketed, so much so that kids are going to die 5 years younger than their parents, right here in the United States. There's a massive effect both on education, healthcare, literacy, and life expectancy. This is not only the US. The UK, Brazil, and China are rapidly decreasing in their activities, both of children and adults. This is causing, of course, massive healthcare issues, and it's causing massive financial issues. We spend twice as much on obesity issues than we do on education for our children. So right there should be, a glaring red flag. It turns out that 20% of this is genetics. The rest has to do what you put in your body and the environment you live in. So technically, the built environment is basically killing us. And we have to figure out ways to design spaces that are much more active, that are full of joy, that allow people to have a sense of place, that we're not all disconnected through this kind of digital generation, that there's gathering spaces that are about extending life rather than destinations. So one of the programs that we've been looking at doing is, next slide, is to create a holistic approach that includes the built environment, that activates young people and allows them to use the city as a place of movement rather than kind of from transportation hub to transportation hub. So it just so happens that this week we're the finalists for the American Giving Awards. It's a $2 million prize. And if you vote for us, see a little plug there, we might win $1 million, which we will put towards this project. Now, I have 8 minutes, and I'm going to skip through this section, which was really awesome, to talk about post-disaster, because I think a lot of you have Sandy in the back of your mind. You know, we as builders, what can we do to rebuild an area? Now, we've worked in Haiti both before the earthquake and after the earthquake. These are pictures before and after, some of the kids we were working with before, and this is me leaving a prosthetics department a few weeks after the earthquake. And believe me, what I learned from that visit to the prosthetics lab was that earthquakes don't kill people, buildings kill people. That's pure and simple. When we build bad buildings, it kills many, many people. So what we do as an organization is we set up a firm. We set up a nonprofit design firm that has a very non-digital way of working. For those of you who are under 35, this is like an iPad. There's a swiping mechanism used to erase information. But it allows communities to figure out that their friends and their neighbors are also getting their homes built with us and how long it's going to take, and actually setting the expectations of construction based on construction work, not based on Anderson Cooper, right? It's about recovery that is thoughtful and smart, not about, you know, numbers and press. Figuring out how to train local workers, how to do material assessments. And actually, Autodesk has been a partner with us for many, many years. We've been setting up these CAD and BIM training labs so that we can train local professionals so that they can actually have the tools and the skills so they can get the international contracts to rebuild their own country. What happens, a disaster happens, a massive inflow of international money, and all of the donors say, well, you have to have all the CAD documents ready for us. Now, you've got an architect who's worked in the country for 30 years, doesn't have CAD training, suddenly they're not getting the work. Suddenly, all the architects in that country are unemployed because of the bureaucracy. So being able to train people up, having them the bid and tender process, and making sure that we're eventually designing ourselves out of a job. Right now, 85% of our staff in Haiti are Haitian architects, and by the end of the year, it'll be 95. So we've been building schools, school after school after school after school. We've been building homes. We're going to be building approximately 2,500 homes. We've built 500 so far. We've been creating jobs. We've created over 7,000 construction jobs in the last year, and also creating economic engines by mapping the core of the community and being the bank, which means we're now making loans to small businesses to restart their business. We use the construction fees to do the nonprofit work. We'll design and build your business, and then we'll give you a no-interest loan to start that business. I have 5 minutes. I'm going to jump past Japan because I want to talk about Sandy. We did beautiful work in Japan and still are, so here's some beautiful pictures. So this is my city. New York is not where I was born, but it's the city that made me the person I am today. My undergraduate degree and my graduate degree focused on homelessness in New York, how to create transitional and sustainable housing for the homeless in New York. I lived in New York for over a decade. Architecture for Humanity was created there, and so when Sandy hit, it really didn't hit home until I had my first visit. This is the Rockaways. This is the Rockaways.
Eric, do you want to say anything or no?
Yeah, so we're in the middle of the fire zone in Breezy Point. You can see pretty much everything is destroyed here. Anything that wasn't taken by the water was burnt out by fire. You're looking at an area of maybe, I don't know, 16 square blocks that have burned down to the foundations. There's just nothing left. Most of this community was working class families. A lot of first responders here, ironically, a lot of firemen, police officers, things like that. So a very devastating loss.
So these are internal videos that we have for project reports that we send to each other. That our folks are out in the field. The team are going to be living out there. That we're also working in Seaside Heights. I'm not embarrassed to admit that I've been partnering with the cast of the Jersey Shore to, yes, okay, I am slightly embarrassed, but to help rebuild the economic lifeline of Jersey, which is the boardwalk. So we've been working in Ocean Grove and Seaside Heights and a few others. And in New York, we've been working in Red Hook and the Rockaways and Breezy Point on housing. Our plan is a 5-point plan that we do with a lot of long-term reconstruction. Our local chapter in New York has over 400 licensed architects and engineers. They've also been working in the Office of Emergency Management. They were there on day one of the storm. We're doing design and construction assistance to nonprofits to help rebuild and repair those kind of acupuncture facilities. Providing technical assistance. What's happening in Red Hook is a lot of the buildings were owned by mom and pop landlords. You know, they were a family that lived in Long Island. They owned a building in Red Hook. They can't afford to repair the first floor of the building because their insurance doesn't cover it. So they're kicking all of the tenants out the building, and they're going to have to sell that building. So there's going to be a massive fire sale on a lot of housing because people simply can't build it. So figuring out a mechanism that's way beyond SBA loans so people can actually come back. Of course, the rebuilding on a long-term strategy, looking at mitigation strategies and building for resiliency. It's not like Sandy was a one-off event. It's not like it's a 1,000-year storm. It's not like it's a 100-year storm anymore. So we have to think about the United States that's building resilient and green. In that right now, we've got funds to repair some New York City schools. We're doing rapid repairs for critical career families. What that means is teachers, police, and firefighters. If you don't have those families back in there, you don't have a community. You don't have, you know, the teachers aren't home, the kids can't go to school, which means the parents have to, one parent or both parents end up staying at home, which means the economy doesn't start up. So making sure that we front load those people. We're rebuilding a block, and then in Jersey, as I said, we're rebuilding Seaside Heights. I'm going to talk about this one block. So as I mentioned, I was in New York. I actually worked in New York during 9/11. Some clients are in the building. I spent a lot of time there. But the hardest hit were the first responders. 130th and Rockaway is a pretty special block. They lost 7 firefighters on 9/11 on this block. A month later, a plane crashed on this block. And then with Hurricane Sandy, 8 of the 14 houses are occupied by New York Fire Department families. The place is gutted, as you saw by the videos. These are all the firemen from all over the country that have come down to help rebuild that block. And so we've been working with them to figure out a way how to rebuild it in a much more resilient way. This is one of the owners. This is Bernie. Bernie lost his son. He worked at Cantor Fitzgerald on 9/11. His 2 other sons are fire department firefighters. This is his business and his home. I've been talking to him for a while. When we finished talking yesterday, it was about a 2-hour conversation about how we're going to help to try and rebuild this block and this cornerstone of the block, which is kind of basically the bar that everyone hangs out in. I said, well, I got to go because we're going. And he went back into the rubble, and he was collecting all the bricks and all the kind of material that he could reuse. So when we talk about resiliency, I want to think about resiliency not about design, but as people, and that we as a species are the most resilient species on the planet, and we have to figure out a way to focus that. And if you're a designer, do not sacrifice your soul. If you don't work in a cubicle, don't work in a cubicle. If you want to go and make a difference on the ground, make a difference on the ground. And focus on what truly matters to you. Now, this is a beautiful building, but I don't care about the building. What I care about is the 400 kids who now are in school in Haiti. And to remember that architecture is where life happens. If your building isn't overrun by the community, it's not loved. And a loved building really is architecture. So break the rules, get it built, and more importantly, remember that resilience is not by chance, it's by design. Thank you.
There's a blood red circle on a cold dark night.
Thank you, Cameron. Now, before we introduce our next speaker, let's visit that list of global challenges. It seems to me that Cameron and his team are addressing at least 1/3 of our 15 global challenges through the work they're doing. The point here is that that one solution or program can have a huge impact. And we're going to see that again and again throughout this forum. Next to our stage, Ethan Kay. Ethan is a social entrepreneur focused on building inclusive businesses for low-income households in developing countries. He's managing director of emerging markets for Biolite, a Brooklyn-based startup that designs, manufactures, and distributes smokeless cook stoves. Ethan is currently leading the launch of a large-scale cook stove pilot in sub-Saharan Africa and one in South Asia. He's worked extensively in India and Bangladesh to create partnerships between corporations and local non-governmental organizations. These ventures have created some income-generating opportunities for low-income rural women and have given villagers access to toilets, improved nutrition, and clean energy. In addition, he's a smart guy. He's a Fulbright scholar and a PhD candidate at the University of Oxford. I find him absolutely refreshing. I know you will as well. Please welcome Ethan. Ethan.
The amazing drama you're about to see is a matter of human record. You may believe it or not, but the real people who lived this story, they believe it. They know. They took that one step beyond.
The one consistent lesson I've learned through my work is that developing market-based solutions to poverty and disease is as much anthropology as it is product design or business. Solutions need to be consistent with people's lives, with their beliefs, and their cultural practices. As long as we develop solutions with, rather than for, the communities we're trying to engage, I'm confident we can address many of the global challenges before us.
Thank you. If we were to think about the biggest problems affecting our world, any socially conscious person would have to include poverty, disease, and climate change. And yet there is one thing that causes all three of these simultaneously that we pay almost no attention to, even though a very good solution exists. It's one of the most unreported stories about life in the developing world, and I'm here to tell you about it. In 2005, I was working with a rural community development NGO in Osmanabad, India. As part of my work, I conducted in-depth interviews with women in their homes. I interviewed Meena in a village called Bamaniwadi. At the time, she was cooking lunch for her husband and her 2-year-old daughter, who was crawling beside her as she cooked. Like most women in the village, Meena was cooking on a smoky, open fire. Her one-room hut was thick with smoke. By 30 minutes into the interview, everyone's eyes were watering, we were coughing, and I could barely breathe. I was horrified when I realized that Meena and her family have to deal with this on a daily basis. Yet this is how nearly half the world lives. 3 billion people cook their meals on indoor open fires. When we think about the biggest killers of people living in poverty in the developing world, we think about AIDS, TB, malaria. We don't think about the kitchen. Yet every year, 2 million people die from indoor air pollution from cooking on indoor open fires. It's the equivalent of wiping out the entire population of Manhattan every year. Indoor air pollution kills more people than AIDS. How does this happen? Day after day, for up to 6 hours a day, women like Meena cook on smoky open fires. And when they do, they and their children breathe in the toxic smoke from the flames, which gets into their lungs and leads to fatal respiratory diseases. Half of these 2 million deaths are children under the age of 5. It's the equivalent of these young children being forced to smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day. The biggest killer of young children globally is smoke from the open fire. So there's this serious problem which kills more people than AIDS, and yet we're completely ignoring it. In addition, these open fires have an enormous impact on our environment. Smoke from these fires contains something called black carbon, which is the second biggest cause of climate change. According to the latest statistics on black carbon, open fires contribute more black carbon to the atmosphere than all of the cars and trucks in the world combined. So here's the situation. We have 3 billion people who cook their meals on open fires with devastating health and environmental consequences. Solving this problem would have an enormous impact on global health and climate change. And there is a solution: the production and distribution of ultra-clean cook stoves that dramatically reduce smoke emissions and fuel consumption. I work with a group that has developed an ultra-clean cook stove that reduces smoke and black carbon by nearly 95% and cuts fuel consumption by nearly half. So how does the stove work? The user feeds local fuels, whether it's wood, cow dung, or crop residue, through the side of the stove. Then they light the flame, much as they did their open fire. But the heat from the flame gets converted through a tiny thermoelectric generator into electricity. The electricity, in turn, powers an internal fan, which force feeds oxygen into the flame, eliminating the smoke and leading to the near complete and clean combustion of the fuel. It gets better. The stove generates surplus electricity, enough surplus electricity to charge a mobile phone and provide an evening's worth of light. At an estimated retail price of $40, the stove pays for itself in 7 months based on fuel and electricity savings. And it gets even better. Because the stove reduces carbon, we can take advantage of existing carbon credit offset programs to make this stove affordable to the poorest of the poor. You may wonder why I'm telling you all this. I'm not an engineer. I didn't design this stove. I'm just a guy from Cleveland, Ohio, who has trouble making a grilled cheese sandwich. Yet after my experience in hundreds of smoky homes, I set myself the goal of trying to solve this problem. So I helped the NGO that I was working with to distribute cook stoves to Mina and her neighbors. We distributed a stove marketed by a large British oil company, but it had some problems. It required electricity, which many villages didn't have. And it needed expensive fuel pellets, which people didn't want to pay for. So it sucked. And understanding why it sucked was my PhD thesis in management studies from Oxford. What this large British oil company didn't understand was how people in rural India interact with their cooking environment. They didn't think about the significance of the cook stove on daily life. What I saw in the months and months that I spent in rural India was that for technology to work, it has to be culturally appropriate. And it's not just this large British oil company that got it wrong. So many previous attempts at improving the lives of people living in poverty have failed. And I came to realize that many of these failures did not employ a user-centered approach. They failed to take into account how real people live, their real behavior and cultural practices. So how to crack the problem of cook stoves? When I really thought about the people that I spent time with in rural India, I realized that the stove was not just an appliance, but the spiritual center of their home. They saw this flame in the kitchen as a domestic god, a deity, and the flame as a messenger between them and heaven. They prayed before the stove daily and created rangoli, artwork they drew around the stove with colorful chalk to consecrate it, to make it a sacred object. In much of the developing world, the wife does the cooking, and she and the children suffer the health effects, but the husband controls the money. So how could we get both the wife and the husband to purchase a cook stove? Most men in rural villages have a mobile phone, which is essential to improving their livelihood. But many of them can't charge the phone at home because they don't have electricity. Usually there's a commercial kiosk a few miles away where people have to pay to charge their phone. In Kenya, people pay $3 or $4 a month to charge their phone. That's 2 days' salary. That's 7% of their income just to charge their phone. But since our stove generates more than enough electricity to charge their phone, men are going to like this stove. There are some design considerations. People in different cultures cook different dishes. In Guatemala, they make tortillas, so they need a large cooking surface. In Ghana, they stir large pots of stew, so they need a sturdy stove that won't topple. In North India, they cook flatbreads, so they need a really hot flame. Our stove is going to need to be customized to serve these different cultures. Around 1440, Johannes Gutenberg, an entrepreneur with a great beard, set out to develop the printing press. At the time, scribes wrote books by hand, yet the challenges of inventing printing were daunting. Civilizations had been trying for thousands of years to mechanically reproduce texts. The Minoans, the Greeks, the Chinese, yet it never took off. In each case, there was something crucial that was missing for mass uptake, whether it was the invention of paper, or the alphabet, or expanded literacy, or buy-in from religious elites. It wasn't just a technology problem. For printing to catch on, all of these technical and cultural and social elements needed to align. Gutenberg understood the need to develop a contextually appropriate solution. For instance, he designed his typeface to look like scribal handwriting so that it was consistent with the look of valuable illuminated manuscripts. He didn't want to break with existing culture, or else he'd alienate prospective buyers. Also, since the church controlled the book industry, he, just like us with cook stoves, needed to get the religious leaders on board. He made his first product the Bible, which, as we know, went viral. This was one of the most important inventions in world history because it led to the explosion of knowledge. But it only took off because it was consistent with the cultural and social and religious context. Today, as in Gutenberg's time, in order to design solutions for any community, particularly in the developing world, it's important to acquire an in-depth understanding of local users and their motivations. It's important to design solutions that are consistent with the way people really live, with their beliefs and their cultural practices. If we do this intelligently, we can solve some of the world's most serious problems. This is the Biolite home stove. I'm 30. By the time I'm 40, let's make sure there are millions and millions of these stoves saving lives across rural India and Africa. Thank you.
Let's put it right up here. Sure. There you go. Thank you. Thank you. Well done. Thanks. I'm just a guy from Ohio who has trouble making grilled cheese sandwiches. If that isn't the best, modest statement I've ever heard in my life, I don't know what is. Inspiring. Thank you, Ethan. Well, looking back at our global challenges, we see these challenges addressed by Ethan's work. And the Biolite example shows a way to run a business in a way that is responsible to its shareholders and the planet. So our next speaker also designed a business, and it was her skills and training as an architect and designer that she credits with helping her reach her goals to design that business. Now, as with Cameron's book, some of you also received a copy of our next speaker's book as well, and you can meet her, and she'll also do some book signings for us back at the table after we're finished today. Trained as an architect, Eve Blossom discovered a passion for the hand-woven textiles of Southeast Asia while she spent 2 years restoring French villas in Vietnam. During her travels throughout the region, she met master weavers, learned their stories, and was moved by their remarkable talents and their spirit. She's a frequent lecturer on design and social change. Eve is not only committed to sustainable, responsible design, she is also intent on changing business methodologies to create economic options for artisans, whether it's in Southeast Asia or right here in the US. She is a sweet and sincere soul. Where are you, Eve? Come on up here, folks. There you are. Well, in a moment, let's please meet Eve. She's amazing.
Have you ever been certain your telephone would ring in the next 10 seconds? Or have you ever walked down a strange street and had the feeling that you knew what lay beyond the unturned corner? Yes? Then you've had a brief encounter with the world of the unknown. You are ready for the actual human experience that follows.
I would encourage any designer to use design to make a better world. because it's never been a better time in history to be a designer. All our systems are broken, and so design is exactly what the skill sets that the world needs today.
So hello, and welcome today. So there's something going on in design, something powerful. People have realized that design is a legitimate way to change the world, to make a difference. And design can also change the fundamental building blocks of business. From household products to social interactions, people are using design in extraordinary ways to make extraordinary results. And this new way of thinking is revolutionizing the design of business and the business of design at the core. And this is happening globally in every corner of the world and every business sector. This is a movement. And social change designers can be found anywhere and everywhere. They can be inside small companies or inside large organizations. They can come from far, far away from countries, or they can be in their own local village, town, or city doing their work. I started my career in design as a trained architect. And in 1995, I was lucky enough to be able to work and live in Hanoi, Vietnam, renovating old French villas, which is a design come true for a US architect. And while I was there, in the couple months after I arrived, I overheard two European men talking about how later that night, one man was going to be meeting a young girl that her father sold her for sex. She was 6 years old. I tried to intervene. I was unsuccessful in changing the outcome for that little girl. But what happened that night truly moved me, grabbed me, and wouldn't let me go. Now, I didn't know anything about human trafficking. I was a designer. So I began to research human trafficking. And I started to see human trafficking as a marketplace, where unfortunately, the commodity is a person. I began to see clearly that trafficking is an economic market that needed to be addressed in an economic way. So in doing so, I started to really research all the different groups that were there, farmers, and everyone was really affected. And I learned that artisans are at risk of falling into human trafficking because their income levels are often below poverty level. So there are many people moving to urban areas, and in doing so, this is where they're most especially vulnerable at that juncture. And job stability anywhere in the world for any of us provides economic options that can help us provide for our families and for our communities. So this is really important. So as a designer, I wanted to leverage my expertise where it really aligned with who I was and the way that I could really help these communities. And in doing so, I learned that I could actually address this issue in ways that I never thought possible. And as a businesswoman, I understood that underutilized, trained artisans are perfect to start a business, because when you use people that have already been skilled and trained and organized, and remember, artisans are already trained in centuries-old techniques, skilled with unique talents, and self-organized in cooperatives, that this was a perfect dream come true in order for me to help with my skill set. So this is one of our weaving centers in Cambodia. So we design and produce hand-woven fabrics. We work with over 650 weavers, dyers, and spinners in Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Thailand, and India, which are some of the countries with the highest rates of human trafficking. So we pay all our artisans fair trade wages, and we educate their children, and we give them housing stipends through our weaving centers. We use natural, local fibers that the families have been using for generations. We use natural dyes and low-impact dyes. And deferring to their expertise, we do not impose external methods. I'd like to show you some of our products in context. So we really push design. This is really important to us, to really push design as much as possible so that we can get into some sophisticated markets with many different product types. So it's never been more of an exciting time to be a designer because the actual skill set that designers have is exactly what the world needs for all the issues that we are dealing with. And we partner and collaborate with our artisans, and we don't think of this as a supply chain. We think of this as a relationship chain. And so when we work with them, we collaborate, we infuse design, and we scale. And we also diversify their risk, which is really important to keep them stable. So about collaboration. So I think many people think they're building a company, but I would argue that you are building a container of collaboration, a place where strong relationships and partnerships can flourish, where it becomes even stronger and can become something even has a world of its own. This is not about the company or the products or the services. This is about much more. This is about what business can do to impact these huge social issues that we have. And I believe the way to do it is through business. If you think about slave labor and how it is through all our, what they call supply chain, it is everywhere. And so this is the way that we can really make a difference in human trafficking. Infused design. What we do with design is wonderful. We actually want to transfer the technology of design and infuse them and have it live inside them. And we call this design sprouts, where one cooperative teaches another cooperative, and in doing so, they actually grow contextually and locally. And then scale. Most people think you have to scale and grow your own company, and scaling does not have to sit inside your organization. So how we scale is we micro-aggregate and we add additional cooperatives. We like we said, create design sprouts. We decentralize and use training centers that are in each country that we actually are locally owned and locally managed that we partner with. We incubate our future partners. We actually hear an artisan that has a business idea, and we help them start it. And then we mentor, which is the strongest way that all of us here can scale our businesses, because by doing so, we are teaching, sharing, and open sourcing. So, before I start talking about Weave, which is the next thing that we're going to be doing, Lulon is actually growing, I wanted to talk about a couple of things that I use personally in my process. So many of you here may have heard about the process of charrette. When I went to architecture school, we used that process. And I use it a lot to charrette around a business, my business, or myself. Now, charrette, the term was used in the 1800s in France. It actually means a collaborative session where you get a diverse group of stakeholders or designers to come up with many different design solutions. So every year, I grab a whiteboard, I grab a bottle of wine, and I sit down and I charrette myself because I have design issues. And I change, my situation changes, my needs change, the world changes. And so I do this with my business as well. And so about 3 years ago, I did a charrette around my business, and I had an aha moment when I was going to take this 8-year grassroots model and really expand it further. And so Weave is this network that we are creating. And it's about a design-centric e-commerce community that changes the relationships between designers, buyers, and artisans in a way that's so novel that you experience buying artisanal products in a very novel way with integrated story. So we are working with well-known designers as well as up-and-coming designers, and we're matching them with our artisans across the world. And which the most exciting part of this is that we're doing it with American US makers and tapping into the US maker movement, which is really important since jobs are needed right here at home. So people say all the time how passionate entrepreneurs are about their business. We are comfortable speaking about passion within business, but we will also have to be comfortable speaking about love and compassion within business, and combining that with successful business models and that honor our humanity and are profitable. And so this is how we can all take one step beyond together, and it's you, the designer, that is needed to make this a better world. Thank you.
Great job, Eve. Thank you. Okay, designers, what are you going to get up off your butts and go do? Listen to all these things these guys are doing, right? You have a responsibility. Just think if, look in this room. There's not a ton of people in here from AU relative to the number of people that we have in general here. But just think if everyone in this room started tackling problems the way that our speakers are that you have heard from so far. We're not yet done yet, by the way. Just think of the impact that you could have on the world today. We could make a difference. Well, thanks, Eve. Let's shift a little and do something completely different. I'm very excited about hearing from our next speaker because he comes from one of my favorite places to visit, and the work they're doing is absolutely wonderful. We're going to meet Gunter. Gunter Weibel is the director of the Digitization Program Office of the Smithsonian Institution. And in this role, he oversees policy and strategy for digitizing and managing Smithsonian assets and the implementation of the strategic plan they call Creating a Digital Smithsonian. With 139 million items, 139 million items, located in 41 facilities, the scale and the diversity of the Smithsonian Collection presents a unique digitization challenge. Gunter's devoted his life to museum science, working to build tools and processes for data sharing in the international museum community. His story is unique today as he's designing an approach and a system that uses digitization technology pioneered in architecture, manufacturing, as well as entertainment. And it's how he applies the technology that we find so exciting. And unlike our other speakers, Gunter enlists the help of, well, let's just say a newcomer.
You're about to see the rarest kind of human experience. One man's adventure into the world of the unknown. You may question, you may challenge what follows. Nevertheless, it is the personal record of someone who took that one step beyond.
Excuse me while I'm doing a little bit of double duty here. What I love about working for the Smithsonian is that I get to interact with experts in many, many different disciplines. Any given workday might revolve around conversations about how we can preserve our variable media art or how to do better in managing our frozen tissue collections. Sometimes I go home in the evenings and I see my colleagues being interviewed on TV as experts on things such as the Space Shuttle Discovery or Islamic art. But the very best days are always the days when I go behind the scenes with curators or collections managers to look at our collections and to figure out how we can bring them to the world by digitizing them. Did you all see that yawn at the end? She was not impressed. I hope I'm going to do better with all of you. I'm here to talk to you about how the Smithsonian is currently investigating using technologies, techniques, processes that were in essence pioneered by you all, by designers, by architects, by the creative industries. How can we use these 3D technologies in a museum setting? Before we delve in, I'll give you a brief thumbnail sketch of the Smithsonian, We're a vast conglomerate of museums, research centers, and the National Zoo. We have 139 million collection items, and our scientific investment could be measured by saying we have 500 scientists with boots on the ground in 100 countries around the world. So a place of that size ought to make really big plans, and here are the big plans we've made to create a better world. We call them our grand challenges, and I'll walk you through them really briefly. Once you realize that the Smithsonian runs 2 out of 4 of NASA's great astrophysical observatories, the challenge of unlocking the mysteries of the universe that we've tasked ourselves with doesn't sound quite as ludicrous anymore. One of the contributions we're making to sustaining a biodiverse planet is that the Smithsonian manages the longest scientifically observed plot of land. It's a little island with rainforest on it in the Panama Canal. In terms of valuing world cultures, one of the investments we're making is in a program called Recovering Voices. There are 6,000 languages spoken in the world today. Every year they're getting fewer, and Recovering Voices strives to document these languages and to preserve them as best as we can. Last but not least, when you have the Star-Spangled Banner, you sort of have the market cornered on celebrating the American experience. So these are our grand challenges. They're laid out in the Smithsonian's strategic plan, and that plan also talks about how we want to reach the world with the products of our research and with the information about our collections. We want everybody to have access to this information with one touch of the screen. Now put that in context of the current situation. Our collections are effectively hidden, if you want to talk about it that way. We have about 2 to 5% of our collections on display when you come visit our galleries and our museums. And at the present moment in time, only 1% of our collections is digitized. When I go to work every day, the thing I think about is how can we increase the quantity and the quality of our digital assets? That's the foremost task in my mind. So I want to take you on a brief journey where I talk to you about one investigation into how we can increase the quality of our assets. And it's about how to apply 3D technology that you're all so familiar with to the Smithsonian setting, to a museum setting. And I'll walk you through 4 use cases that are all aligned with these grand challenges I've just laid out for you. The first one is from Chile. While widening the Pan American Highway, construction crews in Chile were in for a big surprise. Where the lane was supposed to go, they found 75 fossil whales, many of them in pristine condition. Scientists in the past would have documented this find with a drawing on gridded paper. We were able to send down a team to Chile to document this excavation using the latest 3D technology, and while the actual specimens are jacketed and awaiting processing in the National Museum of Chile, the kind of data products our team came home with already informs a discussion among scientists of what led to this massive kill of these whales and what kind of impact climate change might have played there. One of these data products will also go as a 3D print in our Natural History Museum. Case study number 2. Gunboat Philadelphia was built and sunk in 1776. It's the beginning of the American naval fleet. It was sunk during the Revolutionary Wars in a battle with the British, sank to the bottom of Lake Champlain where the icy water preserved the boat almost perfectly. It was hoisted to the surface of the lake in the 1920s and then hoisted into the fledgling National Museum of American History in the 1950s. We've now documented the boat using 3D technology with 2 primary goals in mind. First, we want to tell a story about how terrifying it must have been for 40 men to fight on top of that boat in this very cramped space with little or no protection. Second, we've documented parts of that boat in such high quality that we can talk about how over time the wood is decaying and perhaps arrest that decay. What you see here is a sculpture, a stone sculpture that's about 1,400 years old. It actually started its life as a teaching tool. In low relief carving on that sculpture, you see depicted scenes from Buddhist scripture. We documented this particular sculpture using an articulated arm laser scanner, and the resulting data really makes the low relief carving on the body of that sculpture pop. And it allowed our curators and our educators to now map what's depicted on the body of that sculpture back to Buddhist scripture and turn this object, which we primarily now display as an aesthetic object, as an aesthetic experience, turn it back into a teaching tool and turn it back into an experience that actually connects back to Buddhist scripture. My last example comes from space, unlocking the mysteries of the universe. We're all used to seeing these rather stunning images that are in 2D from telescopes, but we realized that what our colleagues at the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory were actually capturing in terms of data also lends itself to 3D modeling. So here what you see is a draft rendering of a supernova whose light took 300 years to reach the Earth, and this is a first attempt to render that in 3D, and we hope that by doing this, we can actually ask new questions and get new answers to about this event by visualizing in this particular manner. So if you look at all of these case studies in totality, I hope you agree with me to say that this is making a compelling case that 3D has a real place in museum culture. And even more than that, I would say it showcases that the activities at the very core of museum practice are going to be impacted. Scientists used to go out into the field and come home with specimens. We might be living in a world very soon where scientists go out into the field with a laser scanner and they come back with data. What does that mean for museums? What does it mean to incorporate these tools into our conservation toolkit? What implications does it have for education when we now can tell new stories about oftentimes familiar objects, objects that we've told many, many stories about in the past? And what's the impact on allowing us to get a new read on rather large data sets where visualization really helps you understand what is happening? So while we've only scratched the surface of this investigation to date, I think the implications are profound. All of your professions have been revolutionized by 3D technology, and I think it's fair to say that what we might see on the horizon is the same happening for the museum field. Started out this talk by introducing you to the fact that we have almost 140 million collection items, and I've now shown you 4 use cases. We've got about a dozen more use cases, but of course what's really pressing to my mind is how can we scale this up? We really got to make this work at a much bigger scale in order for it to have impact at the Smithsonian. I'll just give you one brief example. We've got in our entomology collection 35 million what I like to call bugs on pins. And they are highly significant. Our researchers like to remind me that you don't have to go to the rainforest in order to discover a new species. You can do it right in the basement of our Natural History Museum. So how can we invent processes, come up with workflows, invent the tools that allow us to capture collections at that kind of scale? We don't have the answers to that yet. One of the fledgling ideas for how to tackle this challenge is to enlist the world in it, and to do that maybe through the process of a challenge. I'm inspired here by this report from McKinsey & Company, and the winner is, which talks about how challenges can lead to innovation when the marketplace has not supplied that innovation yet. So perhaps creating a prize around digitization at the Smithsonian will allow us to partner with all of you to figure out how we can digitize these collections at scale and bring them to the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Gunther. It's exciting stuff. Arguably, our world is better when we know more about ourselves and about our world. And digitizing these collections, putting this stuff online, making them accessible to literally anyone, anywhere in the world can only be a good thing. So it's very exciting. And by the way, all of you have the ability to start doing this kind of stuff as well, right? There's technologies that we give away for free at Autodesk that let you take your smartphone out of your pocket and take pictures of something and get back the 3D model. So again, I'm hoping, we are hoping, that you're inspired as you hear all of our speakers today to think about how you're going to go out and make a difference. You're certainly going to enjoy our next speaker, Gia Schneider, the CEO and chairman of Maytel Energy, another very bright person. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering from MIT and has over a decade experience in the energy and renewable industries. She is a smart executive that understands the energy industry very well indeed. She has provided strategic and tactical solutions to several major energy companies as a consultant for Accenture. In 2005, she started the carbon emissions trading desk at Credit Suisse, building a profitable multi-million-dollar business in its first year. She now leads a team of talented engineers with a very elegant approach to increase renewable energy with far less impact on communities and the environment. And she has a few things to say about the role of design to address this and all of these challenges. So please, let's meet Gia.
I am motivated by the challenge inherent in the fact that our world has finite resources, yet is home to more people than ever before. It is very easy to default to false choices between conservation and growth, between economics and the environment. The specific challenge we face is how do we design elegant solutions that deliver a better life for all, but do so in balance with healthy, vibrant ecosystems.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and to share a bit of my passion for designing better hydropower systems and what that means for us as we go forward to deliver energy to more people than ever before. Conventional hydro has been around for over 100 years. And so when we set out, and carries with it quite a bit of baggage, quite a bit of negative baggage. So when we set out to think about how do we design a better system, we grounded ourselves in thinking about what do we want to actually achieve. And in that process, we focused first on outcomes. In particular, we decided we wanted to really focus our design on ways in which we can preserve or enhance optionality in the energy systems that result, and then minimize impact, but also maximize benefits. And if we could do these things, then we would not only address the energy issue, which is one of the big challenges, but we would also do so in a way that enhances sustainable development, provides more options with respect to adapting to climate change, enables a longer-term view, as well as advancing on science and technology. All of this, though, of course, had to be grounded as we mapped from technology to product to market in the realities on the ground. It's not easy to build new energy systems, and it's certainly not easy to build new energy systems at scale. And so you have to take into account, we had to take into account as we built our business, the fact that there are big structural issues, most of them political, some regulatory and financial as well, as we go to market. So first off, why did we choose hydropower? Hydropower, again, it's been around for a really long time. We chose hydropower because it is an energy source that has a number of very attractive characteristics. It's reliable, it's dispatchable, and it is baseload. It is also an energy source that is globally distributed. It's found in significant quantities on every continent that is populated by humankind. As you can see from the blue bars, the light blue bars, there's quite a bit of potential that remains to be developed. Again, on every continent that is populated by humans around the world. There is a lot of development ongoing, over half terawatt that is currently either planned or in construction. And this presents an interesting conundrum, because hydropower, as it's conventionally done, is not always the best thing. This comes from the fact that the amount of energy you can deliver from moving water is a function of pressure times flow. Now, conventional technology has always optimized around pressure. It's an interesting case when you think about design and how people approach design from a technology perspective. But conventional technology is always optimized around pressure, and the result of that is that in order to implement conventional technology cost effectively, we build big dams or we build long intake structures. And that's what then ends up in the large footprint and the large environmental and social impacts that come from conventional hydropower systems. So when you think about hydropower, you probably tend to think about pictures that look somewhat like this particular project in Brazil. That is what constrains the developable potential for hydro going forward, and that is what we set out to change. So we said, okay, can we as engineers think about optimizing around flow? And if we optimize around flow, what does that look like? What opportunities does that open up? And it came out, as we went through this analysis, that we felt that there were two big opportunities that would then come forward. The first on which we're focused is what we call the built water infrastructure. If we can develop a cost-effective and efficient, low-pressure but large flow device, we can then enable the retrofit of hundreds of thousands of existing structures in built water infrastructure around the world. We like to think of this as kind of the regenerative braking system, if you will, for the built water infrastructure. These are places this infrastructure already exists for other purposes. That energy is currently wasted or certainly not recovered. And if we have the right technology, we can now capture it. It ranges from small projects, which you see here on the left from your perspective, which is an irrigation drop structure up in Oregon in the Pacific Northwest, about 1 megawatt in size, to much larger projects. On the right-hand side is a lock-in dam on the Mississippi River in Missouri, about 40 megawatts of power. The second opportunity is really where this goes to scale from a global perspective, particularly for developing countries. And this is, for us, probably the ultimate motivating factor, which is to completely recast the way hydropower is developed around the world. On the left-hand side is the conventional way. Build a big dam. That big dam carries with it a fairly significant inundation footprint in most cases. And that inundation footprint is what gives the negative impact. That's what requires the relocation of villages. It's what wipes out ecosystems upon which those villages depended for their livelihoods. And this is what motivated us to say, is there a way for us to do this differently? Well, our vision is that by moving to a distributed system, which shown on the right, you can then do, instead of building one large, say 500-foot tall dam, you could build a system of 20 20-foot dams. And what you get by going to this method, again, this is dependent on that cost-effective, low-pressure, large flow technology, but what you get with this method is now you have much more flexibility, much more optionality. You also have a lot lower impact. It's kind of visually right away, you're like, okay, I flood a lot less land. What's interesting in the case studies we've done is you can generate anywhere from, say, 70 to 90% of the energy of the high dam, flooding 5 to 10% of the land. In addition, you use about 30 to 40% less concrete, and the big kicker, in our opinion, is the optionality. You now have a system where you can pick and choose where you put your development. If you have a particularly environmentally sensitive or culturally sensitive area, and we'll see if my pointer works. We'll see. Oh well. Anyhow, you can then skip that area and just not develop it. And by doing so, you now embed a lot more optionality in how you go forward for your go forward. So what does this particular technology look like? It definitely does not look like a conventional rotary turbine. The easiest analogy is perhaps to think about the fact that probably all of you came here in fixed-wing airplanes as opposed to helicopters. And if you were to talk about commercial service between, say, Las Vegas and Hong Kong, you would fly in a fixed-wing airplane, not a helicopter. And the reason is fixed-wing airplanes are able to scale. They're able to make the wings longer to therefore carry the amount of people that you need for that kind of a distance. What we've done is instead of wings, we have what we call blades, and they are attached at either end to a belt. We now have a cascade of those blades. Water comes in, is directed upward by these kind of entry guide vanes. The water then transmits its energy to the blades. The blades move away. Water continues moving through the device, goes through a set of mid-plane guide vanes, is angled downward into the downstream second stage of blades, and the same but opposite action happens. The water then exits going horizontally into the outlet. Because these blades are attached at either end to a belt, we now have a rotating output, which we take out to turn a generator and produce electricity. What's interesting and the key innovation is, as you can see, these blades are two-dimensional in cross-section. And that enables us to scale to produce large amounts of power at low cost. So I'd like to shift base a little bit and talk about what we see as probably a very interesting poster child for this confluence of multiple challenges and competing desires for multiple benefits, but that on the surface of it may look like they are in conflict. This is the Mekong River in Southeast Asia. The Mekong River is the world's largest inland fishery. It supports over 1,000 species of fish. And the fish catch annually in the Mekong is about 25% or a quarter of the global annual freshwater fish catch. So it's pretty significant. That goes directly to food security. And the natural functioning of the ecosystem of the Mekong directly supports food security and livelihoods for over 60 million people in the Southeast Asian peninsula. This is currently under threat. And it's under threat from the fact that, let me just get these bullets up, it's under threat from a confluence of competing demands. Not surprisingly, with economic growth, we have an increasing demand for energy in the region. Okay, it's quite natural. We also would like to fulfill that energy demand, to meet that energy demand with low carbon resources rather than building, for example, new coal plants. Also a very laudable goal. But what that means is right now, the conventional way or conventional approach is to look at building over 10 new conventional large hydro projects on the main stem Mekong. If any or all of these are built, it will completely disrupt the natural flood pulse of the Mekong River and directly jeopardize food security for those 60 million people. So our thought process was, is there a way for us to design a better system? And what does that better system potentially look like? We think that the answer is yes, and we kind of wrap it up under this nice little name called EcoSmart Hydro, but fundamentally, EcoSmart Hydro aims to achieve 3 things. First, support healthy functioning ecosystems, because if your design and the way that that particular technology solution is implemented is able to support functioning ecosystems, then that starts to deliver additional optionality and help support the existing communities that depend on those ecosystems, not just animals and plants, but also people. Second, produce low-cost power. If we can't get power cheap, it will not be sustainable. So if it doesn't make economic sense, then it will not work in the real world, and it will not have substantial impact. And then the third is to support other uses, deliver multiple benefits. With respect to the Mekong, the main focus is on the ecosystem side. By just doing this distributed system of low dams, you're able to maintain greater river connectivity, maintain the flood pulse. You do not impound water, so you do not disrupt the natural flood pulse and the natural functioning of that ecosystem. You're able to continue to transport sediments, all sorts of things that are critical to maintaining that healthy functioning fishery. On the multiple benefits side, one thing that is very much of interest right now is to look at the fact that the smaller hydro projects that you put in do create some small ponds, they do create some wetlands. And so is there a way to start to integrate opportunities for aquaculture into the design of that system? So to take a step back out, I think what I'd like to close with is just a general discussion on why is design so important in addressing all of these challenges? And the reason is both because of what design is, as well as the best practices, the culture of design. Design is first and foremost a discipline focused on function. If your design doesn't work, it will not be implemented. You want your home cooking stove, your reality capture program, your home itself, your hydro system to work. If it doesn't work, your design has failed. In addition, we do still, of course, want to deliver multiple benefits, and the bigger picture is to look at delivering multiple benefits. So I'd like to think about, for example, the context of the automobile. In your automobile, I certainly want it to transport me to my final destination, but I would also like it to do so to deliver me in comfort, to help me reduce my carbon emissions, and to deliver me in style. So one of the hallmarks is a good design addresses one solution, but a great design will address many. The other very important aspect of design is the culture of continuous improvement. And this, I would argue, is where design really shines in addressing these challenges. In fact, this culture of continuous improvement is critical when we think about how we find solutions to seemingly intractable problems. In my case with Natel, the conventional ways of harnessing energy from moving water seem to be faced with this kind of, as I mentioned, or as was mentioned in the video, this false choice between development and conservation. And so we said, well, is there a way for us to be smart about applying certain mechanical engineering and fluid dynamics design principles to come up with a technology solution that enables an implementation path that cuts through that false choice? What I've found along the way is that my skills as a system design person haven't given me some of the tools I needed to help make that venture a success. And I think one thing we've heard from all the speakers today is that a great idea combined with a superlative design can indeed address multiple challenges. And so one thing I'd like to put out there as a challenge is that one day, perhaps we can go that one step beyond and find a solution that perhaps addresses all 15 of these challenges. And that would be pretty fun to see. So I'd like to just kind of close with a thought that it's important for us to focus on excellence in design, to take our skills, which are great, wonderful, make us very happy and proud, and apply them to big challenges. All of the, Cameron and all of the speakers here today are finding ways to match their training and their skills to tackle some really major issues. And I would just say that kind of in closing, just given I'm running out of time, I would just challenge and encourage all of you to echo what Cameron said earlier, to join us in this fight, join us in this effort, right, to match our passion for design, your skills in design, with compassion for our planet, our children, and the human condition. Thank you. I'm not sure which one.
Thank you, Gia. And as we've seen time and time again, one solution can have a big impact and address multiple challenges. What I really took from that story is how your team took a fresh look at an established industry and completely rethought it. In a sense, you applied the model of charrette that Eve discussed and applied it in this instance, moving away from the massive dams with equally massive environmental impact and social disruption to a smaller, faster, distributed approach. Yet another example of smart design thinking. Now, the challenges we face as a planet and as a species, they're daunting, yet we're seeing more and more professionals like yourselves devote themselves to meaningful solutions. And we're learning that design is the ideal discipline to address these challenges. And if design is the ideal discipline for positive change, then designers, in other words, you, must be the ideal agents of that change. All of our designers are needed in this effort. Whether you're designing a car, a building, a business, the planet needs your design creativity and your design discipline. We're the solution to the problem of our own creation, the problems of our own creation. So, as some of you consider your next design, your next project, or your next career move, perhaps you'll find a way to do that while also making this a better world. So, I've got my bottle of wine. I'm going to find a whiteboard. I'm going to charrette. I hope every single one of you will do the same thing. Before you go, let's take a look at this short video. I think you're going to enjoy it.
Oh, what do I believe in? I believe that humans get smarter and better every day. Although the world is getting more and more complex, we're all living creatures sharing the earth with other living creatures. This is a living world.
We need to think bigger. We need to think long term. We need to think about 7 generations down the road.
Really being intentional about what we think needs to happen going forward from a planetary perspective, and then aligning our decisions to help move in that direction. And we can.
So at a personal level, why do I personally want to create a better world? Honestly, I think it's because we can, which means we have a responsibility to create a better world.
I think if you ask people, do you want to create a better world? Well, yeah, I think most people do. But how to do that, and which design decisions matter?
Design is not just the thing, not just the noun, the product, the beautiful shape. Design is also the process, how you get there, how you make resource trade-offs and decisions. And so design tools, to the extent that they give us more leverage over our human ability to think more deeply about a problem. And we have many problems in the world that we need to solve.
creating a better world implicitly is we all have to do it together.
The problems we're working on solving are getting increasingly complex. Some of them are so complex, like global climate change, that we don't even really understand the problem, right? We're having trouble grokking the problem, let alone the solution.
But at the same time, the technologies are just now coming out that are going to enable us to solve those big problems. What does it mean when you have open source hardware?
Our brains aren't evolving, basically. The technology is evolving, so what has to evolve is our culture. Those tools define the culture. Tools define the species.
Design tools help us design better. And design is really about intent. What future world do we want?
So if we can move away from petroleum to capturing sunlight to build polymer molecules and feedstocks for all of our manufacturing processes, that reverses the problem that we have with carbon today, for example.
It's the conversations that happen along the way that force us to ask these questions. What do we value? What do we believe? Why are we doing this? What is it that we provide? What is a better world?
So I just see this incredible world appearing where we've just become so incredibly connected, both through our computing technologies and through this shared understanding of living systems. I mean, and the bridges that we'll build between them, that we just become an incredibly enlightened species.
So please, come talk to us at Autodesk about how we can help you to help make this a better world. And before you leave the room, go say hi to Eve, go say hi to Cameron, get your book signed, talk to them. More importantly, read their books. Take the one step beyond that we've been talking about today. Thank you for joining us, everybody.